Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for The Walking Dead Season 9, Episode 14. Alright, so went into this episode with pretty high expectations, to be honest, right? It was kind of advertised as this big flashback, right? The title is Scars, to kind of explain these scars, right? And that was a big point of emphasis, especially kind of right after Rick left, I would say, episode 6, right? I think we got the first bit of it with Michonne's scar, and then we saw Daryl's scar in episode 7, and then everything kind of spun off of there, and I even have done a video kind of breaking down my theories for this, back at, I believe it was the mid-season break of season 8, season 9, and we were talking about, what happened to Alexandria, right, in that time frame, between basically kind of Rick leaving and the, and a 6-year time jump, right, with where we were when we came back from Rick leaving the show, right, in episode 5. So obviously a lot of questions still remained going into this episode about the scars and what all of this had to do with our story going forward as well. Like, why would they bring in this if it didn't have to do with this? And so anyway, so this episode, there was a lot of, expectations, or at least for me, going into it. And this was one of my more anticipated episodes of the season so far. Probably the finale may have been the best, the most anticipated, as it is for usually every season. But when I found out that this episode was going to be the one that explained the whole Scar storyline that they set up, I was actually very, excited, looking forward to it. So, anyways, we'll get into a detailed recap here of the episode, followed by a rating, favorite character, and some more overall thoughts of the episode from me. To be honest, I really liked the concept that they were going with it in this one, and the flashbacks and everything, right, that they put forward, but I felt like it could have been accomplished in a better way, or a kind of, a more sensical way, if you will. I don't know. But yeah, overall, I think it was a pretty good episode in what it was. I think the casual viewers may be a little ticked off from this episode because, if they didn't see that it was going to be about the scars and, all the stuff around it, they probably would have been pretty disappointed with kind of a very slow-paced flashback type of episode like this one. But for me, who was expecting it, I was really looking forward to it, and in that way, I did really appreciate the episode. So yeah, be sure to, leave a like, consider subscribing if you enjoy the review. Really would appreciate it, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this episode. What do you think of the flashbacks, and what do you think of how they explain these scars, and also kind of how that affected our current story as well. Those were kind of the big 3 parts of the episode for sure. So anyways, without any further ado then, let's jump into it. I will say off the bat, they open with this flashback to the episode with Michonne looking for Rick on the banks along the river, right? Take Me Down to the River, right, was that song that was used for his final episode, and of course that played a big part in his send-off, where Jadis finds him, right, takes him on the helicopter. Anyways, so Michonne is able to find his Colt that is buried in the sand on the bank there, which is very symbolic, right? She ends up giving that to Judith in her little case there, and of course, that's how she is using it, right? We saw her, I think, pointed at Negan in episode 9, was it? Or episode 10? It was episode 9. Yeah, episode 9, we saw her pointed at Negan, and so that kind of makes that connection there. And then we see Daryl kind of appearing out of the forest there, greets her, says that he will keep looking for him, right? He's not going to give up looking for him. And I assume that this is about maybe, a few months after Rick's departure, if you will, from the show. But of course, they kind of leaning towards him being dead at this point. So yeah, I believe it took place a few months after. I would argue maybe, 4 or 5 months after, because of course, Michonne is also pregnant, very, very obviously pregnant, in this scene. And so, obviously she wasn't that, she wasn't showing that much, back when, Rick, departed from the show in episode 5. And so for sure, it's at least been a few months. But anyways, so he says that he's going to stay out there looking for him, and that he's not ready to come back to Alexandria yet, and he needs some time to look, to kind of try to find Rick, and also off by himself again. And, very interesting here again, playing on that notion. We know that he spent, maybe even up to 2 years out there in the forest, kind of alone with his dog, looking for Rick and trying to kind of find himself in a little bit too. And so, yeah, of course, we kind of know that already. And what impacts that has had on him now where, he's at the kingdom taking care of Henry and all that stuff for Carol, right? But anyways, just a really nice flashback scene there to begin the episode. Did really remind me, by the way, with the different colors that they used for this episode as well. Remind me a lot of the season 6 premiere. I forget the title of the episode off the top of my head, but that one was great in that they used the different colors for the flashbacks in current times, right? And episode begins off with a flashback with Rick, giving a little speech about the walkers in the quarry there. Anyway, so it did remind me a little bit of that, but it was nice to see that flashback. It was also kind of a strange way to end the scene, too, because Daryl just kind of walks off into the forest and Michonne is just, still walking around and whatever. But it's kind of a weird exchange there that Daryl just randomly appears, they talk, and then he just randomly leaves. But it is what it is. So anyways, so then we come back to current times, right? Daryl comes to the gate with Lydia, Henry, and Connie. This was a lot quicker than I thought, actually. And by the way, I thought this whole episode would be a flashback. I didn't think there would be much current stuff at all, but it turns out I would say it was about a 50-50 balance throughout the entirety of the episode with current times and the flashback, which, I'm okay with, but to be honest, going in, I thought it would just be all flashback. But anyways, so he comes back to the gates of Alexandria there with Lydia, Henry, and Connie. Obviously, we knew this last episode that he said that they would go there to get Henry stitched up, and then as soon as he could walk, they would make their way to the kingdom, right? So then, as the gate opens, and by the way, very, very contrived little exchange here before the gate opens about Aaron saying, oh, what about the girl? Like, we don't trust them. And then Michonne says, I trust Daryl. Really, really bad exchange there for me. It's like, yeah, of course you trust Daryl. Like, I don't know. That was just, whatever. It's just such a small thing, right? But it did kind of get to me. It was kind of frustrating. But anyways, so they bring open the gate, right? And that then sparks the first flashback. And this flashback is that Scott brings brings a girl. I think it was by herself, but maybe there's a couple others there. But brings the girl to the gate that they found walking around outside the walls. And so at this point, of course, they're still kind of focusing outside of the walls. And of course, after this event, they kind of really bring the focus inwards, right, rather than beyond the walls. And so we find out Michonne knows her, and she is kind of I wouldn't say childhood friend, but at least they knew each other before the apocalypse happened, or before all this, as they like to put it in the show. And her name is Jocelyn. And so, of course, she recognizes her right away as they bring her to the gate. And, of course, that really sparks the whole rest of the flashback in this episode. So then we get a flashback after Jocelyn tells basically Michonne about more people that are in need of help. And so they go to this abandoned factory, it looked like, or, abandoned building there. And they open the doors to a dark room then, finally, and they find, kind of a carpeted, a lot of boxes stacked and everything. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the junkyard, a little bit, but obviously in a very confined room. And it turns out that several young kids come out of the, of the kind of piles of stuff. And come to look at Michonne and the others. So very weird, but also kind of an emotional thing of why are all these kids here? And they look very helpless as they come out. And so it turns out that Jocelyn looked after these kids after the rest of the adults in her group didn't make it, or so she tells Michonne. So of course that is a big point, and as we know at this point, that is to be the truth. But anyway, so they bring the kids then back to Alexandria, along with Jocelyn, and kind of take care of them, right? Because that's the thing you do, right? For kids out on their own, especially in this world, right? So then we see one of my favorite scenes of the episode is Daryl and Judith sitting on the dock together. This was an awesome scene. Honestly, I've never thought we would see this, or at least we would see this like right now. Maybe after the Whisperer War or something, but this was really, really awesome. And this just, again, goes back to the amazing job that Angela Kang has done so far. At least with the dialogue and the character development, it has been insanely, just a stark difference from what we got in, season 7, season 8, maybe even season 6, if you want to argue that too. So really great. But anyways, Judith basically asks him to stay if Michonne will let him. She wants him to stay at Alexandria and kind of help them in also reuniting with the kingdom and Hilltop, but also just kind of stay there to look after Judith as well, right? So then Daryl reluctantly says no, right? And the notion of, keeping her and RJ safe in Alexandria is what is important, meaning that, Judith should not want to go and help the Hilltop and the kingdom and go to this fair and all that stuff, and that Daryl getting involved in that, would obviously not include Judith, right? Basically saying that, Judith, you got to stay here because that's most important to keep you safe, right? So then she says that she's heard the stories about the Saviors and how that fight all went, and how something like that could happen again, right? About how the basically, detached group that Rick was trying to build, right, as we saw Rick leave the show, it basically just completely tarnished that whole idea, right after he left. And then, of course, Carol kills the rest of the Saviors in a really brutal fashion, and the Saviors pretty much done. So she's really bringing to light that whole situation. And then she asks, Daryl says, well, you haven't heard all the stories, right? It's very true. And then she asks Daryl what her dad would do in this case. And, of course, he has no reply because she's right in this, right? He was the one who wanted to unite these communities. And, of course, that would go directly against just standing pat at Alexandria and, just letting the other communities suffer in this case, like the kingdom. And so she, wants to be like her dad, maybe. That's what they're raising here. But anyways, a very good exchange there with Daryl and Judith, developing those two characters, especially Judith. There's a lot of development for Judith in this episode, I will say. And I actually really liked it, the way that they were going. And again, I think the whole thing is really just bringing her up to be kind of like Rick and Carl, right? Where they were trying to build a community, the communities together, and build a bigger sense of community, right, with the people. Of course, Rick only kind of, got that notion from Carl, but it all kind of stemming from the same place there, right? So then after that little exchange, we see Daryl and the crew head out, right? And of course, the biggest thing is Lydia is still there with them at this point. Michonne and her have a little bit of a conversation where Michonne kind of tells her that she should maybe leave for the safety of Henry and the others, and so that risk will not be there, that danger will not be there, with the Whisperers coming to look for her, right? But she ends up sticking around, and it's the four of them still, right? So then, as they leave, Daryl tells Michonne that Judith isn't just a kid anymore, right? And so from that conversation, obviously he knows now where her head is at, and kind of telling Michonne that as well. And then he leaves, they hug, right? And it was nice to see that with Michonne and Daryl kind of embracing each other again, as we saw in that flashback, a kind of parallel there, right? So anyways, great development for Judith in this episode, as I mentioned, and with this scene as well. We see her kind of run off then as Daryl leaves, because she doesn't really want to talk to Michonne, right? So then, obviously she's still mad at Michonne for forbidding her to talk to Negan, which I think is not the direct basis of it, but that also could stem as well. But it's mainly the whole thing of being overprotective and not wanting to kind of venture out and help off, help the kingdom, right? And so then Daryl and the crew, right, they're off to the kingdom, to the fair. They're off to attend the fair with Lydia. Wow, I'm thinking to myself, a new level of stupidity that we've never seen before. Honestly, like, this is, and I don't necessarily blame the writing, because I think this is a realistic process that could take place with these characters. But it's like, this is such a stupid idea. Like, why, and they said even in last episode that Lydia would be a constant danger to them, as the Whisperers will keep looking for her, right? I mean, if that beta whole fight in that apartment building, was any kind of symbol of what the Whisperers want and what, lengths they're willing to go to get Lydia back, what else is there, right? It's like, why would you want to take Lydia to this event where all of the survivors are coming together, and you know that the Whisperers are still looking for her and will practically do anything to get her back, including, killing you, to get Lydia? It's like, what? Like, why? And I see the whole point with Daryl, because he's kind of had to embrace Lydia joining them for Henry's benefit, and the whole way of that basically, unifying communities again and helping out others. But it's like, at this point, it's like, it's the worst thing that you could possibly do. And of course, they're going to see the consequences of that. So, to me, very, very stupid decision here to keep Lydia with them and to go to the fair, of all places, where everyone is literally culminating together at this event, where the Whisperers will most likely, invade, right? Or kind of ruin the party. So, anyways, and we see that at the end of the episode, right? So then let's get to the most of the flashback stuff. So we focus in on a sewer grate here, and a flashback starts where Michonne and the other parents go to pick up their kids from Jocelyn's place after a sleepover. Turns out she was, little babysitting them a little bit over the night. And Judith is missing along with the other kids. So they go around looking for her at Alexandria, right? And they find the infirmary and the food supply place, right? They still have the food supply in the garage, even though it looks like the community has grown quite a quite a bit throughout the term, and they still have the food supply in that garage. Anyways, so both those places are looted, and they find a man killed right by the food supply place, and then they see a blood trail that leads to the sewer. And, of course, this all points to Jocelyn. So, anyways, a really kind of great thing, kind of real anxiety here that we see from Michonne and the other parents as well, breaking out in this scene, right? So then we see the parallels between the two timelines as they set this up, as later that night, Judith sneaks out of her room after dinner, just as Michonne, right, came to talk to her about possibly the events of Jocelyn and how that all happened with Judith and her being taken. Just as Michonne was going to talk to her, Judith ends up leaving her room, and of course she's maybe off to the fair, maybe off to Hilltop, we're not quite sure, but she is off to somewhere. Anyways, Michonne then goes straight to Negan. This is awesome, and basically questions him on where she went. Negan doesn't really know, right? Negan doesn't really know where she is at all, and that she didn't actually come to him. And he actually opens up to Michonne about, how he's been telling her stories about the all-out war, and what actions that he did. He even says that he told her about Glenn and Abraham, the head bashing and all that stuff, and, that she's learning more and more from him, right, about these events that Michonne has just never told her and is not willing to tell her. So I really like the way that they're setting up Negan here, especially in this scene too, as he's becoming a bit of a moral compass a little bit at this point, where he's right in this matter, I think, with Michonne and Judith. And again, in this episode, we see that he is influencing Michonne in making these decisions. And, obviously they're building to something here, right? With Negan probably taking over, this kind of leadership maybe after the Whisperers. That's long term. But yeah, I do really like the way they're setting up Negan here. And obviously Michonne too overprotective and not willing to let Judith be free, right? And of course, though, we know she has her reasons after seeing this flashback, but I do still think Negan is the one that is right. And also, is kind of using common sense here a little bit, while Michonne is kind of, basically stressing the emotional, aspects of obviously the current events, the past events of what happened, and also kind of how she feels and how she wants to protect Judith, right, and RJ, right? RJ plays into this too, with the new baby. So then we get back to the flashbacks. So then we see Daryl and Michonne bound together to find Jocelyn and Judith, and the other kids as well. Michonne says that she let her guard down with Jocelyn, and because of it, she was able to get away with it, right? And maybe this explains why she doesn't take any chances now, and ultimately we know it does, right? So this was really great in that I really like the wording here about letting her guard down, right? And that really, really explains why she never lets her guard down ever, even with people that she knows, right? With Ezekiel, Carol, Maggie, right? Now Tara, right? All these people that she knows and loves as friends, she's not even willing to let her guard down for them because of what Jocelyn was able to get away with here. And so anyway, so then Daryl says, this is on her, we'll find her and make her pay. So great line there from Daryl. Then we see them, they find an abandoned school building, which is kind of the perfect place for them to take kids, right? It's super ironic, but it also makes a lot of sense within the context, right? Anyway, so they find this abandoned school building, and one of the kids is standing outside. Then, right as he sees them, he kind of runs inside, and Joe chases in after him. And right as they enter, they're met by a group of, it looked like Jocelyn, and then there's a couple kind of teenagers, but most of them are younger kids. But I think she was really the only adult, within this group. Anyway, so they see him in the hallway. Michonne kind of yelling, "Where are my kids?" Right? Where are RJ and or not RJ? Where are Judith and the others? And then one just shoots Daryl with a bow. One just shoots Daryl in the shoulder. The other knocks Michonne out. So they're not ready to even talk at all. And they just, quickly take care of Michonne and Daryl here. And so then we see that they both come to as they're bound to a pipe on the ceiling with their hands tied. And as they both wake up, one of the boys then comes with a, really kind of hot metal, right? In this X shape. This was really great, right? So one of the boys then marks Daryl's back with this X, of course. Excruciating pain, right, for Daryl, and Michonne then, as Jocelyn kind of applauds this kid, and even the kid says, "The strong survive," and then Jocelyn says, "And thrive." So, as we know, kids are completely brainwashed at this point by her. Not the kids that she took from Alexandria, but the kids that were already kind of with her before, that they rescued from this other building. Completely brainwashed at this point, right? They think that doing these acts are, good, and that they have to be strong, right? And obviously, just very, very emotional kind of to see that these kids have been completely just brainwashed and kind of flipped here in their, knowledge and kind of perception of the world at this point, right? So anyways, then we see the next kid marks Michonne, and of course another X on her back, and she screams in pain. So really, really tough. And we also have to remember, Michonne's pregnant throughout this whole thing, and that plays a big part too, in how badass she still is, even though she's obviously, can't, that agility isn't there that she usually has, and possibly that strength as well. So anyways, of course, this then explains these scars, the 2 X's that they got were these kids marking them here. So then we skip to them getting out of the bonds and taking care of the guards. This was a very quick jump where we didn't see any of this play out. I wonder if that maybe got deleted, I guess deleted or taken out of the episode before it aired. Maybe that was originally part of it, but the runtime was a little too long because of it or something. But a very quick skip here. But anyways, so they take care of the guards pretty easily. They split up to find Judith, and Michonne is met by Jocelyn and an army of kids in the hallway. Which, it's kind of funny, but it's also very sad, right? To see these kids are, holding swords against her and trying to fight her. Well, I have no chance. But also sad in the fact that, obviously these kids are brainwashed and they think that this is the way to go, right? So anyway, so she quickly scares them off. But of course, she gets slashed in the stomach from this one boy, and very gruesome there as well. And but then she ends up scaring them off. So then she runs after the others who run out this door and get in the trailer in the backyard of the school. So obviously they've been there before and they know where they're going and the whole plan of if something bad happens, you run to the trailer. So of course then she runs through the door. As she opens it, she gets clotheslined by Jocelyn with a block of wood. It looks like maybe a 2x4. And anyways, Jocelyn just smokes her with this 2x4. And then she actually, starts beating her with this plank, right? Hitting her over and over in the back. And obviously, just immediately, obviously painful, but also very harmful for this possible baby. So it's really impressive that Michonne even still gave birth to RJ at this point with all this kind of pain and violence against her in these scenes. Anyways, so then Michonne eventually kind of gets her sword, turns back, and stabs Jocelyn right in the leg, and then as she falls down, right down into the chest. That was an awesome kill. The way they set it up too, it was so satisfying at that point to see someone so evil like this using kids, and seeing her finally killed and defeated by Michonne is really great. So we see the one kid told to go and kill Judith in the trailer by this, I believe it was like the older kid, or the oldest kid, who's like the teenager guy. Anyway, so he was telling the last kid there to kill Judith in the trailer while the rest of them charge at Michonne. She tries holding them back, right? She tries holding a couple of these kids back, obviously pretty easily too, right? But then she's forced to brutally slaughter them. Right? And God, remember, they are just kids at this point. But as they attack her, right, this kid is running towards this, this trailer, this RV, to go and kill Judith. So in order to save Judith, and she doesn't know that the kid is going to do it or not, right? And so at this point, she basically has to do it in order to save Judith. And she's forced to slaughter these kids with her katana, right? I mean, brutally slaughtering them. I believe she beheads the one, as we see in the little, like, flashback loop. So, really, really brutal, right? So anyways, after she kills them all, and, we see her face, too. She's so hell-bent on saving Judith here that she doesn't even completely realize her actions until then Judith comes out of the trailer after she convinces the kid not to kill Judith. The kid just runs off anyway, so he probably wouldn't have done it, but maybe he did, so, that's obviously debatable. But anyways, so Judith then eventually comes out and she says, "Mommy," not right away though. She hesitated a little bit there. And so then finally we find out that she hasn't been brainwashed, at least, or at least not, to the point of the other kids. And so the rest of the kids come out as well with Judith, and Daryl joins them. So holy shit, right? A crazy thing there with this whole storyline of Jocelyn brainwashing these kids, and the actions that Michonne had to take in order to save Judith by slaughtering some of these kids, or mostly all of them. And Daryl, you see, comes out and he's like, he's just he can't, fathom what has just happened, and kind of the aftermath of it, and seeing Michonne covered in blood and all these bodies on the ground, dismembered bodies too. So really kind of a crazy little scene there. So anyways, then we transition to current times, where basically all of this gets wrapped up, right? And so we see where Michonne finds Judith out in a field with a bunch of walkers. So this is where she was going. Judith takes one down, but the last one then comes up to grab her. Michonne is luckily there. She saves the day, and they hug it out, and pretty great. And as also we see Judith scream "Mommy" right as the walker kind of grabs her, which is very similar to the way that young Judith said "Mommy" as she came out of that trailer, right? So great parallels here. So Michonne then says, "We need to talk," right? So we get this basically really great scene, right? So Michonne telling her about the moment where she came out of the trailer and how she wasn't sure if she was, knew even who she was or not. And it turns out that Judith remembers it, which I really did not like. That, one thing I really did not like, that Judith remembered the whole thing. I also think that's I don't know. I think that's some bullshit on that one, because it's like, it's really hard to agree that she would remember that event from 5 years ago, and how she was so small, or so young. It's very, very hard to think that she would actually remember those events. And the way this whole scene played out, you could have easily had it that she didn't remember the events, and then that would still spark this scene. So I really didn't like that she said she remembered them, because I just don't think it's believable. But anyways, so she says that she didn't recognize Michonne with all the blood, but then when she did, she came out of the trailer. And again, it's like, how would she remember that very day that she would, come out of that trailer in that exact situation? Very hard to believe. Anyways, so she says that she was right to do what she did, and that Michonne had to, right? Michonne had to do what she did. Michonne thought Judith didn't remember, and that's why she didn't understand why Michonne, or why she didn't why she was acting the way she does, being overprotective and not willing to basically, let her guard down ever again, right? Anyways, and so then Judith says, "But you do know," and so Michonne then says, "Why, you do know though, right? Like, I thought all this time you didn't know that. You do know, so why the hell are we here?" she says, right? So then Judith says, "Our friends need our help." And that's kind of the basis for everything here. Michonne says, "It's not that simple. Loving someone means doing whatever it takes to keep them safe," right? And very, very impactful, right? Because it's just as Michonne did in slaughtering those kids, in that she loved Judith, right? And she did whatever it took to keep her safe in that moment. And so, of course, really, really great parallels here for sure. And this gets to Michonne too. She becomes kind of teary-eyed and starts crying. Judith cries as well. And so then Judith says, when did we stop loving Daryl and Maggie, Carol, and the king? Very emotional stuff here. Michonne says, we didn't. And Judith says, then why does it feel that way? Great point for Judith here, and what a great heartfelt scene. Honestly, Judith is right. I mean, why does it feel that way, that we stop loving, all these other people, these other communities, because we're not helping them at all anymore, right? We're not willing to do whatever it takes anymore. And so really great point here for Judith. So we see at the very end of the episode here, Judith and Michonne then visit Carl's grave, and she says on that day that they buried Carl, which of course we know, Honor, episode 9 of season 8, she promised to never bury another child again. And she explains that because of that fear she had after the event of Judith being lost, the community made a decision to make Alexandria only about the people who lived here, or who lived there, no outsiders, like none at all, right? And so that really explains then also why Judith bringing Magna and that group back, basically sparked a big kind of controversial thing in Alexandria and with Michonne. So really great. So then the quote from Michonne, that's not what your dad and Carl gave their lives for, but it kept you and RJ safe. So that's the basis of all her actions, and that she says, that's all I wanted. So Judith says, you are right, we have to protect, Michonne then says, back to Judith, you were right, we have to protect the people we love, and we will. So finally a turning point for Michonne, right, and this whole impact of her remembering the flashback and Judith now getting through to her. Finally, we have a turning point with Michonne, and now she is willing to kind of let her guard down again, but only for, friends that she loves and that she knows. And so Judith has kind of helped her with this. And of course, this turning point is just in time for Heads on Pikes, which will most likely be happening in the next couple episodes, most likely the finale. But anyways, so we see end of the episode, Michonne and Judith on their way to the kingdom then, together as they both decide to go. They run into Daryl and crew on the trail, and so they offer them a ride, and they are off. So really great to see that as well, and Daryl kind of reacting to Michonne's changing viewpoint on that was also really great in just his facial expression. Then to end off, we see the Whispers at the edge of the kingdom walls say, we must tell Alpha, right? Shit is about to get real here, guys, in the next couple episodes with this fair. Alright, so in terms of a rating for this episode, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. So in this episode, as I said off the top, I thought it was a good concept that they worked towards with this one, but the way they got there could have been better. I also mentioned that I went into this one with high expectations, so that is also another kind of thing that contributed to my, again, I enjoyed the episode. I thought it was a very good episode in what it was trying to do, but I felt like it could have been better, right? It was good, not great, for me. And so the whole Michonne and Jocelyn thing seemed very forced to me. The whole thing of a friend of hers that she knew in the past coming back just seemed very convenient, and the chances of that at this point, I mean, we have to remember, they are years into the apocalypse, and Michonne wasn't even from Virginia, or, where they are right now, in Alexandria, and now Jocelyn just somehow happens to be there. That's like a huge distance to travel. And just the way it all went was very kind of unbelievable for me in that aspect. And so to me, I feel like they could have got to the point of where Judith is trying to change Michonne's mindset with a different way. You know what I mean? Kind of bring in a different group that takes Judith, and that would have been all the same. But just take out this kind of unrealistic play of that it was her friend from that she knew when she was in high school. Very kind of cliche, and we've seen this before with the survivors meeting old friends and then they turn out to be totally different than they used to be. I mean, this is just something that it honestly has become a cliche with this show. And so to me, for something this important and to spark this whole change of Michonne's mindset and this whole flashback thing, I feel like they could have definitely went down a better path or got a better method in getting to this point, if you know what I mean. So anyways, and again, with high expectations, I was expecting like a group like the Wolves from season 6 to be the culprits of these scars and this whole storyline, but it turns out it was just kind of one woman that, was Michonne's friend and that they brought in, and then, her kind of being able to brainwash and control these young kids, which was also, obviously a kind of a big story in itself, but not quite to the extent of what I was expecting with, I thought it was a Wolves group. I really thought the Oceanside had a lot to do with this one too, but turns out they have no involvement in this, which then begs the question of why we haven't seen them in the last, 10 episodes of the series. Really weird, but anyways, it is what it is. So, great emotional and heartfelt scenes in this one. The dialogue was amazing. I'm not sure who wrote this one, but yeah, really, really great dialogue. The scene with Judith and Daryl, scene with Judith and Michonne, just some really awesome stuff here. And Kaylee Fleming, by the way, who played Judith, she is really great. For her age, you can't expect much more from a child actor. And, she's just doing an amazing job, too. So she was great. And again, the events of this episode seem very coincidental. I do like that they waited a little bit longer to reveal this whole Scars story, but it seems very coincidental with, of course, the fair. It really kind of feels like they needed to get Michonne and Judith and Daryl, and them to the fair, right? They needed to get them to the fair, and so then they kind of went back and they're like, okay, how do we do that, right? And so let's do this flashback episode right before, play out this whole storyline that the viewers have no idea about, but we've hinted at before, and then that'll get them to the fair. So to me, it seemed very coincidental that this episode was, right before. I felt like they could have maybe laid the groundwork for this earlier and kind of played it out a little bit as we went, and then kind of got them to the fair in that way. But it was okay in that the episode really did a good job of explaining it and revealing, the entirety of what they were setting up before. But anyways, those are my thoughts there. Favorite character for this one is got to be Michonne, Denai Guerra. This is kind of a spotlight episode for Michonne and Judith, but mainly Michonne. Denai Guerra, great, right? Great in this episode. I will say the first couple scenes of this episode, I felt like she was kind of phoning in a performance, and I don't know why I felt that, but the rest of the episode, she was absolutely just great in her performance, and very emotional performance as well, which we don't always see from Michonne or as of late within the show. So really great stuff. And Denai Guerra, we know, will be probably leaving The Walking Dead after next season, but really, really great for her anyways, for her future and career, with, Marvel, and she's a playwright as well, so really great stuff there for Denai Guerra. But anyways, Michonne, fair character for this one, for sure, and we'll have to see what her role is then in the fair. I don't think she'll be dying, of course, because now we know Denai Guerra is returning for Season 10, but I think she is going to have a part to play with this whole fair thing. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this review. Thank you so much for the support on the channel and the support for these reviews. I do really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to next episode. I have heard some rumors that we might see the Heads on Pikes even next episode, but probably the finale at this point, so we'll have to wait and see. But anyways, guys, again, thank you so much for watching this one, and then we'll see you in next week for the review for The Walking Dead Season 9, Episode 15. Should be a good one.
Lay me at the bottom of the river.